Pops and the Rican.
Pops and the Rican.
Look at this Pops and the Rican. The Pops and the Rican. What's the Pops and the Rican? Look at the top of his head. Look at his head. Pops and the Rican.
Pops and the Rican.
Oh, yeah. Hey, look, it's Pops, and evidently, I'm not sure if the Rican, I don't know if his parole got canceled, or I'm just making that up. I know exactly where he is. Yeah, Steve couldn't be here tonight because he had another obligation, and I tried to get him out of that obligation, and then I'm no longer invited to his family reunions. I'm not sure what that's all about, but anyway, I'm Pops, and this is the Pops and the Rican Show, and here's some interesting information that we wanted to kind of let everybody in on. And well, I just noticed the door opening in my studio here because my dog was here with me. He doesn't want to be on the show anymore, so he left. He's annoyed by me. Anyway, I know what I was talking about because I got distracted. And yeah, the Gutty's Comedy Club, we've been closed down for so long, and now we're doing shows at 50%, which means we only have 40 seats for people to come and enjoy the show. But we have had 2 weekends now with that 40 seat arrangement. And we've had 2 weekends of really good shows, and it's been exciting to actually have people coming back to the club. So if you're wondering what you should do this weekend, by all means, download our app and get tickets for this weekend. We got Local Levity. That Local Levity is a time where we bring in some of the young up-and-coming comics that may not be at that headline set yet, but they're working towards it, and so they've got a decent set that's pretty close to a feature level comic, and we've got them coming out, and we've got Will Kincannon, comedian out of Bloomington's, coming up to Greenwood for the weekend. Ryan May, who has been involved with a couple of different shows and some improv stuff that's going on at Gutty's. He's going to be doing some stand-up that weekend. Trent Mabry, young comedian that I keep telling him he's going places, mostly because I want him to get out of the green room because we need to clean it up for the headline shows next weekend. No, I'm just making that up. But no, Trent Mabry is going to be on, and then Tony Foxworthy. And so those 4 guys, they're going to bring the goods. It's going to be a great time. You don't want to miss it. And so please tell all your friends, tell your family, tell complete strangers to download the Gutty's Comedy Club app, get their tickets, and come out this weekend for Local Levity Show. And we're looking forward to that. And once you download the app, you'll be able to see all of the upcoming shows that we've got. And you'll probably see some information on there about our guest tonight, because he will be coming to Gutty's in a little bit later in the summer. I'm guessing I should have looked because I'm old and I'm forgetful, and I know we've got him scheduled. I just don't remember. I think it's July. But then if I get on and then he says, "Man, you're old and forgetful," yeah, he's probably right. It could be August. It could be September. It could be October. No, it's not October. I know it's not that far. But, yeah, we've got him coming back. Well, I shouldn't say back. We got him coming. But that's not why we're having him on today. Today, we said, hey, we need to get this guy on because he's got a new album getting ready to drop. And if you have not seen him because you haven't been watching anything on Drybar comedy, or you haven't been watching America's Most Wanted, you might have missed some of the stuff about him. So we're going to talk about his new album and how that's all going. And so I guess I should probably stop talking about him and get started and have him come on so we can talk to him. So without any further ado or anything else for me to do, I'm going to bring on our guest today, Ricky Glore.
Hello,
hey, Ricky. How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. I want to let you know it's September 25th and 26th.
I appreciate you helping me out because you know, I should. It's really one of those things. I should know all this stuff. I do know it, but I've forgotten half of what I think I knew before I even knew it. So
I like that there was a hiccup when you're like, I forgot what you were even going to say there.
yeah,
No, I'm appreciative. You guys, I was scheduled for March, I think it was 13th and 14th, and that was the first weekend of everything getting shut down. So I felt the axe early.
well, I now that I know that, I know who to blame because yeah, we would have had shows all along, but Ricky was like, I don't think I want to go see those guys yet. Hey, can somebody unpack the Rona? Yeah, we need the Rona. You know,
It sounds like an economy car from like the early 90s that like Geo would have put out. It's like the Geo Rona.
It's either that or Yugo, the Yugo Rona. You go, Rona. And I don't know. So, well, Ricky, welcome to the Pops and the Rican show and Gutty's TV. We're thrilled to have you with us. So let's talk a little bit about how you got your start in this comedy business. What was it that kind of got you thinking, hey, I could be funny. I might actually make some money doing this. Let's try.
I can get long-winded answering things. Feel free to cut me off. The gestations of being interested in comedy was a lot of stuff that my dad had shown me pop culture-wise growing up. I grew up on 60s Batman, a lot of 50s and 60s television. The Monkees were a huge influence as a little kid. Then slowly as I got older, watching Saturday Night Live, watching Comedy Central, where they did a huge rotation of 80s SNL. So my cast, for most people, it's when they're in high school. I was in high school 2000, 2004. That's not my cast. My cast is like 89 to 90, where there's a huge cast, and it's Phil Hartman, John Lovitz, Kevin Nealon, Dana Carvey, Mike Myers. You're starting to get in Chris Farley, Sandler, Spade. Love that cast. Favorite cast member, Phil Hartman, all time. And I like all the guys who are the glues, like Dan Aykroyd or Bill Hader. But so watching a lot of older television movies, Peter Sellers, a lot of Peter Sellers, like After the Fox.
Yeah.
If anybody's not familiar, check it out. It's a great romp. Pink Panther movies, loved them. And Hope and Crosby movies, any of the road pictures I fell in love with. And then when I was little, probably anything that was on my spectrum of like, as a kid, was Ernest, Jim Varney stuff, Pee Wee Herman. Just soaking in all of that different comedy influence. Like I said, the road pictures and the Monkees, where you get wholesome Hope and Crosby, but you get the Monkees where they're a little bit more radical. They still played on a lot of the same themes, but just with music. So I love that. That just really shaped my sense of humor. And then when I got old enough, besides making my parents laugh or friends laugh doing voices, I started auditioning for plays. I was a football, baseball, wrestler, and then got hurt my junior year. So none of those things were viable options. So I started doing theater. and then disappointed my parents by switching my major from secondary education English major in college to theater. I told you this is going to be a long-winded answer. Tried doing improv in college, and I really wanted to be on the college improv team, but it was kind of a tough nut to crack. And so audition, couldn't get in because my end game was graduate college, go to Chicago, Second City, Improv Olympics, SNL, because I knew that was kind of one of the tracks. If it wasn't going to LA and being part of the Groundlings, I'm saying a lot of things that if people are listening and they're not sure, just write it down and like type in Wikipedia, Groundlings, Second City,
Google it.
Yeah, Google it. So feeling like I didn't have an outlet for comedy in college and doing improv, Newport on the Levee, which is by me near Cincinnati, opened up a Funny Bones comedy club. And at first you could be 18 and see the first shows on Friday and Saturday, but then all other shows are 21 and up. Well, they stopped doing that. So I wanted to see shows, but wasn't old enough. I was 19. But Kentucky has a weird loophole law where you can be 19 in a day and serve alcohol. So I got a job at the comedy club serving. And so I got to watch all the shows for free, and then slowly found out that I wanted to do stand-up. That could be my outlet. And Jeff Jenna, who's a great comic you can search, who's been sort of a mentor to me, he was teaching a class. And so I signed up. And the first day of class, there was like 30 people. And he was like, look, if you signed up for this class because you think I can make you funnier, not going to happen. But I can give you stage time and give you writing prompts. So you're on stage every week talking for 5 minutes straight, which anyone who doesn't do stand-up, even though the number one fear, people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. So many people that hate public speaking still think that talking for 5 minutes is nothing.
Right.
If you're a stand-up, you know that's entirely different. You could go up on stage with a bit that you're like, oh, this is a 15-minute, 10-minute story.
Exactly.
A minute and a half in, you're done.
Yeah. Boy, I hope I don't go too long, because I came with my whole 45-minute headliner set, and you get up there, you boom, boom, boom.
I started doing stand-up that way, and because I worked at the club, I started doing bar shows, started doing the open mics at the club, hounded the manager, and so anytime, especially when anybody who used to be on SNL or affiliated would come through, I'd bug him and I'd say, can I MC? Can I MC? Eventually, I got my first MC weekend with Finesse Mitchell in 2005. And so from then on, MC'd, then moved up to feature. I did move to Chicago, kind of gave stand-up the back seat for a little bit while I did theater and comedy, plays, some sketch comedy, improv. And then moving back to the Cincinnati area in 2017, I started doing stand-up again more regularly, and that kind of put me on the path to where I am now.
Yeah. So when you look at...
Unpack there.
Well, when you look at the time you spent with improv, how much do you equate using what you learned in improv that helps you on stage when you're doing stand-up?
I think we're in a lot of comics who, there are some comics, not all of them, who like to brand stand-up as going up there and being off, like talking off the cuff. Again, a big misconception among audience members are that stand-up comedians are just up there talking.
Right.
That Robin Williams made it up every night. Another guy that's like Robin, Harlan Williams, as much as he makes it look like this is the first time you're hearing anything, or this is the first time whatever's coming out of his mouth has been said. No, it's just he's so good at it and comfortable and confident. He's making you feel like you were the first to hear and see.
Right.
That. Yeah. But I feel, though, as much as I come from a theater and a playwriting background where I like to write, And I do like the immediacy of stand-up of as soon as I write something, well, before quarantine and everything, I could write something and then 20 minutes later or that night, get it in front of an audience somewhere at an open mic or wherever. Hijack a bar, you know, you can tell people. Improv, I think, helps you with the unexpected, with the tone of an audience, with feeling out what time of the night the show is at and knowing kind of the energy to present, knowing how to play the audience with the energy, not necessarily changing your material, because you can't just, if you're going out there to perform a 45-minute set, if they're not digging what you're putting down, you can't just like, oh, I guess I'll throw out the rest of this 30 and do something else. It's the give and take of the audience is almost like your ensemble on stage with you. You've got to feel off them and work on them. And some comics that are eating it on stage, they'll sometimes talk faster and louder, but I don't think that works. But yeah, so improv is really just, I think, helps with taking the temperature and knowing how to meld with the audience, because you're ultimately there to entertain them. If you're there to show, one of my biggest pet peeves, and I've said this a bunch of different places, are comics that go on stage to show people how funny they are.
Right.
And I think you can smell that real quick. Those are usually the comics that berate an audience for not laughing at what they think is a really funny bit or really smart. And they're like, oh, a week ago I was in Detroit and they really like that joke. Almost to make the audience be like, oh, are we not as good as Detroit? Oh.
Yeah. I love it when a comic is up there and they're so convinced that they're God's gift to humanity, and and they'd hit a punchline and they don't get the response, and their first thing is to say, well, that must be the audience's fault because I was too clever, I was too intelligent for them to get.
Right.
And you know, it's just the opposite for me. If I hit a punchline and it doesn't go anywhere,
move along.
I move on.
Yeah.
I might throw in a comment. I got to make sure and go back when I listen to that to see why I screwed that one up. You know.
Yeah.
And make a comment, but I always own it because 99.999% of the time it's my delivery or my flow that didn't connect for the audience. You know. So
yeah, I think you always, as a comic, big. If you record yourself with audio, I think visually it's good to see mannerisms, and I think that's a further down the line way to make yourself better. I think audio is really good because that's the first thing really the audience is getting, is hearing the cadence and the speed of your voice. Yeah. I think there's sometimes if an audience doesn't laugh, it could be they didn't understand what you were saying. Right.
And it's one of the things I talk to anybody that comes through comedy college when I'm teaching. I always say to them, you got to record every show you do, because there's so much you will learn from the recording afterwards, listening to it, to see, is there something in the editing of my material that I need to rearrange some of the words? Is there a positioning of this joke? Do I need to put it a little bit farther into the set or a little bit earlier in the set? How do I, you can learn so much, but if you're not recording it, you're not learning.
I have a new bit that I may be doing when I'm there in September, once I get some more shows back to work some things, because of the album coming out. I feel that I have to, even though I'm sure not everybody who would be at a live show will have listened to the album, watched the Drybar special, or has seen me before. I feel for myself, I need to retire a lot of the stuff and start working on new stuff. Granted, I'm not going to get rid of everything. I'm going to sandwich it in the middle of stuff that really works well, because I think that's, in my experience, the best way to work on it. But I have a bit about guns. It is not overly political. It is a little bit of my opinion, but while writing it, I had to write it and go, okay, do I think this is funny and not just being up on a soapbox? giving my opinion. For one, because I'm not well known enough, and I'm also not a political comedian to get away with that.
Right.
The other thing is thinking about the bit, thinking of it being funny enough without turning off a bunch of people. Also then thinking, okay, this can't be within my first 10 minutes or 15. This probably needs to be at minute like 28 once an audience is on my side and has liked me already, gets me a little bit more. And then they hear this, they may recoil. Some people may recoil at first, but then hopefully the jokes will get them.
Right.
And if not, I got to test it out. If it doesn't do well, if the recoils are more or the butt clenches are more than the laughs, then you have to get rid of it. Like,
right.
Work it as much as you want, but then ultimately realize that if it doesn't have the percentages behind it, you're there to make people laugh. And if there's a 5-minute chunk of your act where people are disconnecting, you're going to be working so much harder the next 5 minutes to get them back.
Exactly. You know, I say to a lot of comics when I'm having that conversation, it's good for you to have your opinion, your point of view, and you can talk about just about anything out there and share your point of view, your perspective, as long as you're doing it in a funny manner, because your number one job is to be funny.
Yeah.
So you get out there, be funny, and then you can talk about it. If you want to talk about guns and you've got a view, a point on it, do it, be funny,
yeah,
and talk about it. But if there's so many people that think that they can get up and rant on something and the audience is going to find it funny that they've been bold enough to talk about something that may be considered taboo or whatever.
Right.
If it's not funny, then why are you doing it in a comedy show?
You might get the shock value of an opening line, but then if you don't follow up with that with laughs. I think a good parallel is Jerry Seinfeld in the documentary Comedian, which I really love. It was kind of my comedy Bible when I was first starting off, and still is something I go back to and watch probably 2 times a year. Once the documentary, and then another the commentary track with Colin Quinn and Seinfeld. But he says, some people are like, oh, but isn't it so easy for you? Yes, you're working on a new set, but you can go up anywhere and people just love you and laugh. And he's like, no. He's like, Jack Nicholson could go up on stage at a comedy club. People will applaud, give him a standing ovation. But if after 5 minutes, if Jack isn't being funny, they're going to be like, you need to get off the stage, Jack.
Yeah. Hit the road, Jack.
Yep. And I think it's the same thing with the subject of material, that you could be extremely prolific in what you're saying or what your stance is, and it could be 100% true. And you could have a lot of people that agree with whatever stance of a taboo subject in the world of comedy or in the world of social interaction. But if it doesn't have jokes and it's not either A, relatable funny, or B, just funny,
yeah,
what are you doing talking about it?
Yeah. And I think that's, it's one of those things where so many young comics want to get up and I want to be edgy. I want to be in your face. And I'm like, why don't you start being funny first? It
has a lot to do, I think, too, with confidence, that a lot of young comics, an example is myself. I can go back and look at my notebook of jokes from when I was first starting off, and I'm like, who is this? Like, whose voice is this? I didn't have a voice. I didn't have life experiences, or I didn't have the ability to tap into the real life things that were funny. I didn't have the distance from them to acknowledge that they were funny, where I do now. And Glenn Tickle, producer of the album, commented, he's hyping up the album in the live comments section. He's the producer of Circus Trapeze.
So he's like, hey, everybody get out there and listen to that right now and buy it. Buy it, everybody. If you're not buying it, you're wasting my time.
Yeah, it's go to circustrapeze.com/Ricky Glore and buy Spinning Image. You can get a physical copy, which also has a download link in it. So anybody's like, why would I get a CD? New cars don't even have CD players. Where would you play that, Grandpa? You like even laptops don't have CD drives anymore. You can buy it just for if you want to have the cover and the artwork that's inside and read the liner notes. And I don't know. I like having physical media, even though I still download stuff. So I still get some vinyl. Once you take the CD out, it has a downloadable code. So then you can have it on whatever device you listen to music at.
Yeah, you download it, you bring the CD in so Ricky can autograph it when you come to Gutty's Comedy Club.
If you buy it now, it already comes autographed, but I will sign it again.
and then what do you do with that instead of using it as a coffee coaster? You could give it to your grandfather, who probably still has a CD player, and will listen to it. Hey, I got this new technology. You should come listen to it. So
it's 100% clean too. But so 100% clean. I wasn't clean like at all as an MC. I thought there were things I had to talk about. I didn't have the experience. And I think it is just the best thing for a comic on stage is confidence. And so I think a lot of young comics think, well, unless I'm talking about this thing that I have a strong opinion on, I won't be confident because I don't know how to play on stage. So you may talk about taboo, hot, political, religious, the things you're not supposed to talk about at a dinner table kind of etiquette. They want to do on stage because at least they know that they have a passion or a confidence behind it to get it out. And then, yes, get your stage time and do that, do the bars and stuff, but then build that confidence and start writing, putting jokes in there.
Right. So Eric Hunter on YouTube asked the question, what's your favorite joke that you've written but you've never performed?
Favorite joke that I've written but never performed? I have performed almost everything. That's what I said. I love the idea of writing it and getting it on stage. I can say a joke that I have written and did a few times in feature sets, and it never worked. I thought was really funny. I even said it to my wife, and she didn't give me a reaction. And she's like, I know you think that's funny, but I'm not laughing and the audience isn't, so maybe you should stop doing that. And the bit was that there were more that even though there's a bunch of serial killer shows on Netflix and podcasts and what we're obsessed with serial killers, there isn't as much serial killing as there was back in the days of like Jack the Ripper. And I said more serial killings existed because people had, they didn't have technology to keep them from being bored. So like they'd ride 8-hour long train trips that will take us like an hour now. And they sit there and they'd be thinking, they're like, man, if I was going to kill a bunch of people, who would it be?
You got all that extra time to think about killing folk.
Exactly. And then I said, well, the first ever serial killer were cavemen. And it was a bit, basically it was like Law and Order, but it was like cavemen and like a caveman detective, like asking a bunch of cavemen who all had like bloody rocks around them who killed the other cavemen. So I thought it was very funny and well written. Audiences every time they were like, nope.
Yeah.
Move along.
I've had material like that where I'm like, okay, the premise is hilarious and I think it's going to be great. The audiences never really, the payoff wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I never, I tried to edit and I tried to rearrange things and I just never got it to where it was getting the payoff that I was hoping for. But I will tell you that I've gone back and I've taken some of those bits and I've turned them into some short sketches.
Yeah.
And in sketch comedy, with all of the acting out and the reactions from people that are in the scene and things, it works. So
and
maybe
I think always keep notebooks because keep them around because when you're looking through for new ideas, you can even mine some things for jokes.
Yeah, so maybe maybe you need to take that that whole premise and that whole bit and see what you can do in terms of turning that into a sketch instead. And once you get it written, send it to us, and we'll get our sketch pad team to put it to work, and we'll produce it and give you credit on the video that we produce and have some fun with it for you.
I will happily. The only other thing that I've written that I've not done yet, but it's probably going to find its way in the new hour, is a Jack Black impression where it's Jack Black karaokeing his favorite Fleetwood Mac song. Would you like to hear?
Please honor us with it.
Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Don't stop. It'll soon be here. It'll be better than before. Yesterday's gone. No, yesterday's gone.
It's Jack Black, ladies and gentlemen. Jack Black.
Where was Jack Black just here?
I used to back in the day. I had a bit where I asked what would it have been like if Sam Kinison would have sang love songs.
Ow!
You know, if you don't know me by you never will. I would just go on this rant, and it was a lot of fun because I could just rant and scream, and the audience was laughing. So I almost blew my voice out doing it one time because I really was selling it over the top, and I was like, "Yeah, now I'm kind of hoarse for the rest of the show." So,
I did. It's in my Drybar. It's on my album. Brian Johnson, the lead singer of AC/DC. The bit is, like I said, it's on the album too. Rock stars had to have 9 to 5 day jobs. So how weird would it have been if Brian Johnson, the lead singer of AC/DC, came up to your table at a restaurant as your server and was like, "Welcome to the restaurant! We got hot soup and bread rolls! Yeah!" So I haven't done it in a while, so it was a little hard to do it then. But even harder is when you're traveling on the weekends through different weather and it's cold and doing like 2 shows a night. And that second show, you need a shot of whiskey before you start doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't even drink whiskey, but I need a shot, please. Yeah. Yeah.
Penicillin.
So let's you've brought up the album, and I did throw the banner up for people to know where they can learn more about the album. Let's talk a little bit about it.
Can't see him.
When's that getting ready? You're getting ready to drop that soon. This next, is it next weekend? The week next after that?
There it is. Yes, June 19th. So next Friday. We're hopefully going to have a fun bit of marketing to coincide, maybe like right before it drops, which is a music video for one of the songs that appears on the album called Taco Kitty. And that will hopefully be dropping next week before the album. So be on the lookout for that. And the album, you can pre-order it now. If you're going to get a physical copy, do that. If you're going to get the iTunes or the downloadable version on the Circus Trapeze website, do that. Pre-orders help the artist out so much just because those numbers get reported to like Billboard. And on iTunes, when you've already had a good amount of pre-orders, it'll put you higher up on the list of like the top 50 albums that are comedy for iTunes. And it's a lot more visible. So definitely pre-order now, whichever way you're going to get it. And if not, don't buy it now and come to Gutties or live shows and then buy it from me so you can take a picture of it with me.
Well, I would say download it
and then buy it physically.
And then when you come to the club, you buy it again, and you get that way you'll have more Ricky Glore autographs to sell on eBay when he's rich and famous.
One can dream.
So, where'd you record the album?
It was done at Burning Bridges Comedy Club in Pittsburgh, February 15th. I remember that because it was a Saturday, the day after Valentine's Day, and the night before I had done a show, I think it was in Indiana. And then I drove from Indiana to Pittsburgh the next day and did the first show was a sold out show, and it was great. We recorded that, and then we recorded the second show, which was about half full and was awful. So I'm so happy we recorded the first show as well, because there would be no album if it were just the second show.
I know when I got together with 3 of my comedy buddies that we're all men of size, and we
size. We're all MOS.
Well, you got to be politically correct. I can't say we're all fat because somebody's going to send me hate mail. And if you're going to send hate mail, send it to Ricky Glore. No, I'm just kidding.
Gmail.com. You can. I'll call the mail.
But I just know when we were out, we did the Heavyweights of Clean Comedy DVD project, and that was our biggest fear, was that one or both of those shows would just go in the crapper, and you'd be like, "Hey, we're here to record a DVD for all 3 of you." So
it's hard when you're recording, especially. We recorded the show on the road. It wasn't a home club, so it was the only person I knew there was my opening act, and so you got to put a lot of faith behind that. And luckily, like I said, that first show was awesome. It was sold out. I mean, can you think of a time that you bombed in front of a sold out crowd? Most of the time when people are that packed in, they want to have a good time.
Yeah. When you get a sold out room or a packed house, it's almost the energy that is just buzzing naturally in that room almost carries you to a whole new level. And you're almost performing out of your head in a way that you've never performed before, just because it's that much of a buzz.
And because I'm neurotic when it comes to creative things. I did a show in Alabama, in Birmingham the next weekend, and I was like, "Oh no!" I was like, "That was a better show." I was like, "Did someone record that? Did the club record it? Like maybe that should be the album. That should be the album." I was like, "No, like." I'm going to do that every show now. Like, no, that should have been the show that I recorded.
Well, I guarantee you when you come to Gutties, you're going to be like, that should have been the show.
That should have been the show.
So
live from Gutties.
Is this the album? Was it produced by Circus Trapeze, or did you self produce that and then they just picked it up to help you market it?
Glenn Tickle is a fantastic comedian as well, out of New Jersey. And this was about a year ago when I knew I was going to be recording my Drybar set. I started getting serious about thinking about having, because that's only a 22-minute show. I was like, well, I know I'm already headlining. I know I'll have a headliner set that I'll also want out there that will contain things that do not appear in the Drybar show, for whatever reason, for their editing. One of which is a story about my dad stealing a sign from Burt Reynolds at his ranch, which I guess didn't make the Drybar because it's about stealing. And up in Utah, they don't want to have stories about stealing.
There's probably a number of reasons. It was about Burt Reynolds. It was about stealing.
About Burt.
Yeah, so
it didn't make it, and I love that story. So it's on the album. But so when that was already in the books, about a year ago last May, I was thinking, well, I want to put it on an album. I want to do it under a label so it can be as professional as possible. And I started Googling different comedy labels. And one I had found was a self-starter label called Circus Trapeze Records by Glenn Tickle. And it was this article in a magazine about how he got his first album that he self-produced and he released. And when they asked on the forms, what's the name of your label? He put Circus Trapeze as a joke, because it's a joke that appears in his set. And when he did that, he hit the top 10 or top 5 or maybe even number 1 on the Billboard 100 charts for comedy albums. and they called him and they said, okay, we're going to print this article about you being number one, your album. Yes, really, Glenn Tickle. And they said, we just want to make sure, is your name really Glenn Tickle? And they're like, it's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, we also want to confirm your label Circus Trapeze Records. And he's like, I guess it is. And so since then, he's been producing albums for different comedians that he's met here and there. But so I reached out to him. So the article is all about how you shouldn't have a label produce your album. You should do it yourself. There's more money in it. There's the costs, are less. A lot of times labels will want you to pay for the engineer. A lot of times, so they don't get stuck with that cost. And so I emailed him. I was like, would you be interested in doing mine? I'm going to be recording Drybar. And he sent back what felt like an email he had replied back with to a lot of people, like a form letter. And like, thank you. As the article states, I think you should produce your own album. That's what the article's about. You'll get more benefit from it. With a label, we got to take this X amount, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, oh, well, okay. And then a couple weeks later, I was like, you know what? I'm going to hit him up again. I'm going to be like, hey, so I'm doing all this. I would really like, looking at what you've produced, what the label's produced, I'd really like to be under the label. And so he replied back and we started chatting. And he's like, all right, I might be interested. And I had a show in Pennsylvania, kind of more closer in his neck of the woods. And I was like, okay, you haven't agreed yet 100% to be the producer. How about you come be on the show? I'm headlining. You see the show live. If you like it and you want to produce the album, great. If you like it, don't want to produce the album, that's fine too. And if you don't like it, whatever, part ways. So he came, did the show, and after my performance, he was like, yeah, let's do the album. So that's how it came to be. And it's been awesome. If you haven't checked out Glenn Tickle yet, his first album, Yes, Really, is fantastic. He's going to be having a Drybar special coming out probably within the next couple months because they recorded it before this all went down. And he also has another great special now on Amazon Prime called Good Grief, which is a whole set about how he lost his brother who died a couple years ago. And it's not just sad. It's about how to deal with sadness through comedy.
Yeah. And it's one of those things. I don't remember who it was that said something when I was first getting started about how tragedy and distance from that tragedy will allow you to see the comedy. And I didn't really understand that until I dealt with some significant loss and had to go through it. And I was like, now I get what they were saying. But so there's some healthy response from being able to find the funny in the tragedy. And so I look forward to seeing his stuff,
Yeah, like I said, it's on Amazon Prime if you have that, or you can buy the album or order it on iTunes or buy the DVD. One of my favorite quotes is, the sweet isn't as sweet without the bitter. And so I think examining that with loss is you're going through a very sad time. Sometimes the reasons of why someone has passed, maybe they're too young or you don't feel like you've gotten enough time with them. There's always going to be a reason for sadness, but nothing makes you feel better than the celebration of that person and thinking about the joyous times that you've had with them. And kind of like stand-up, you wouldn't be where you are now without that person in your life and those experiences. So really treasure that got to be part of your story rather than regretting whatever you might regret of that you didn't get to do with them or that you wanted time.
Right. Yeah. So
really bringing it down.
This week,
yeah,
on grief counseling, Ricky and I will talk about. No, just kidding. Let me change directions in the conversation just a little bit. we've talked about the album and want to make sure that people know how to get that. But I do want to ask you a little bit about your experience out in Provo when you were out doing your Drybar special out there. Because a lot of people ask me, how do I get to be on one of those Drybars? And I'm like, I don't know. Those are people I haven't met yet. So how'd that process go in terms of, did they find you? Did you submit something to them? How did that happen that you got that connection to do that Drybar special?
I have been rarely found by anyone. Another weird thing of kind of like what we talked about earlier of comedians who go on stage and want to show you how funny they are. There's this other weird kind of perception in comedy right now, and maybe it's always there, of, oh, you shouldn't email clubs, you shouldn't ask people or clubs for stage time or whatever, because if you're good enough, they'll find you, or get good and they'll ask you. You don't want to seem needy. Look, I come from theater where the number one thing I learned in college was, if you don't feel like you're getting utilized or cast in things, make things on your own. So I'm not one to sit on my hands. I'm going to make the opportunities. The only time anyone ever reached out to me was IFC, the channel, the TV channel, had seen my Twitter page for hashtag explain a movie plot badly. And they said, we really like what you're doing on that page. Would you be interested in writing a series of commercials for us? And I was like, nationally syndicated commercials where I get paid to write. I think I was at max allowed to write 11 words for the commercial. And I was like, yeah, 100% I will write this. Drybar, I already knew some comics. I had some friends that had done it. Erica Rhodes, who was an awesome comic, who has a Drybar special, who was on NBC's Bring the Funny. She's hilarious. She had done a Drybar special. I knew her. Jeff Jenna, as I mentioned before, he had done a Drybar special. And my comedy was mostly clean. And I was like, oh my God, I love the production value of this. I really admire a lot of the comedians who do it. I would love to do it. I'd love to have something that looks and sounds that good if I could get in. And the headliner set that's on my album, I had been working on that for 2 years. And so I felt in a good enough place to reach out and find out how to get connected. So I reached out to Jeff Jenna and I said, do you think I am ready to film a Drybar? And do you think they'd be interested? And he was like, oh yeah. He's like, you right up their alley. And so I said, well, if you don't mind, do you have the contact? And he said, I do have the booking producer's contact. I have no sway in if they'll respond to you or not. So what I did was I reached out to them. Gosh, I think I reached out to them in winter of 2018. And they were like, we're still filming our season. This season wraps up in like February or March. Reach out to us then. So then I had a newer set, better, I thought, and a tape, and I sent them that, and they said, we're not casting for the next season until the summer. And so I put a little reminder in the month, and it binged in my phone come May, and I was like, oh, are you now? And they're like, yes, we are now. We'll review and we'll get back to you. Another month later, they got back to me and said, how does your September and October look? What Friday or Saturday would you want to do it? And that was that. And the only thing that I can say that was crazy about that, I had also heard stories about how stringent they are on material. Like I mentioned the Burt Reynolds story.
Right.
Never would have thought that would have been anything that would have ruffled a feather. A part of my act that I do have that I didn't do for Drybar, because I knew they wouldn't probably be happy about it, is I was born and raised and live in Kentucky, where the Creationist Museum is. I have a couple of bits that are about that. They're not necessarily talking down to the people of that affiliation. There's just a couple jokes that use creationism in the Creationist Museum, but I knew not to do those. So when I got the acceptance for recording of the set and we had the date down, I wrote them and I was like, do you want me to record my whole set that I would perform for you, or send you the transcript so you can tell me things that are good or not good? And they're like, no, you're fine. Just come here and be funny. And so I was a little neurotic about that because I was like, I had heard a story about a guy who closed with a joke that had a sexual innuendo at the end. And I don't have that in my act or at the beginner or the closer, but because it closed his act, I heard that they shelved his special.
No.
That it never saw the light of day.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, I would rather you look through it and tell me what I can or can't do than, you know, tell a bunch of people, oh, hey, I'm going to go record 2 shows in Utah. They're flying me out there. They're putting me up. It's makeup. It's, you know, glitz and like, it's awesome. Like, it's sold out shows. It's a stage that's a theater, but it's also 10 cameramen, you know, 3 holding them, 2 on tracks. And like, it's awesome. It's the most pampered that I will probably be in my life of doing anything. And I didn't want to mess up that opportunity. So I can't say that I wasn't nervous during it.
Yeah. Cause you know, that one guy probably didn't think that he crossed the line so far that they'd pull his entire special.
Yeah. And how many people did he tell in his comedy scene, I'm going to be going to do this? And then people are like, where is it? And he's like,
yeah. Hey, keep watching for my special. It's going to drop any day now.
Oh, that's crazy too. The uncertainty. And I get it because they record a lot. You don't know when or if your special is going to drop. Yeah. I recorded it at the beginning of September. Mine dropped at the end of March, I think.
Yeah. And that's got to just kind of make you go a little bit crazy because not only are people who follow you in the least bit asking you all the time, so when's this going to happen? You know, but you find yourself kind of sitting there going, so is this going to happen? You know?
Yeah, because I'm also someone that's not kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of like not reaching out for opportunities. I'm not someone who doesn't self-promote. Now, it's not an ego thing. It's not like, oh, I'm the greatest comic ever. It's not like a Muhammad Ali, like braggadocio kind of thing. It's just I will put as much stuff out there because I want every opportunity, because there is so much stuff out there on social media and the online that I want to have the best chance of catching somebody's eye and listening or seeing what I have to put out there. So they might be, like I said, it might be braggadocio to some people and they're like, oh, he's not even that great. Not that anybody who would come to Gutties would hear or say that.
Well, they know if they're coming to Gutties, this guy's gonna be great.
Well worth the money.
We had one guy that wasn't extremely great, and he has not been seen, and I don't know what happened.
He's in a desert in Vegas somewhere.
He and Jimmy Hoffa are doing comedy shows together. So, no.
In the Bermuda Triangle with Amelia Earhart.
So, Ricky, let me ask you this. In your comedy career, what's the best piece of advice somebody's given to you?
My first weekend of performing, because I don't feel that there is a specific audience for a specific comedian. Like, I think if you want to go somewhere and laugh, it's helpful if you know who the person is. Like, that's nice. It's a nice safety blanket of we spent X amount of dollars on tickets. We got a babysitter or whatever. I know I'm going to go see Jerry Seinfeld and I'm going to get Jerry Seinfeld. It's a very nice comfort when you're putting out money and giving up your hard-earned time. Because again, I feel the audience gives more than the performer does just by being there, by showing up, even if it's a free show. they still have given their time before I've given anything. They're giving me the benefit of the doubt. Most people that come to comedy clubs or shows, they want to laugh. They don't want to sit there and judge you. They don't want you to not be funny. That's a terrible night. And the people who most of the time are guys who come there and heckle with jokes back are always the guy that says, yeah, in my office, people say I'm the funniest guy there. And it's like, oh, I'm sure you are, buddy. Best advice, I would perform in front of any audience starting off. So my first weekend was Finesse Mitchell, considered under comedy breakdowns as being an urban comedian because he's black. That was my first weekend ever. And his audience was predominantly black. And Steve Geyer, if you can see Ricky doing his penguin impression, you can at Gutties. I will still close the show out that way because that's not on the album because it is a silent bit. And we realized my closer, which is an impression of a penguin looking for his wallet, has no sound. Not so good for an album.
Imagine, people.
Yeah, I think that's what Steve Martin used to say about some bits. He's like, the people at home are really loving this one.
Yeah.
So my first weekend was that a predominantly filled black audience, people of color, and I naively didn't think anything of it. And after the Thursday night show, which there's one show on a Thursday, I got off stage and the show was over and Finesse came back to the green room and he's like, great job. He's like, have you ever performed in front of a black audience before? And I was like, no, why? He's like, yeah. He's like, you got to get in their face. He's like, you're a young white guy, nerdy, because I wore glasses and a brown corduroy jacket at the time with elbow pads. He's like, you're coming to the stage like a nerd, like a pale white nerd. He's like, you have to be a little bit louder and a little bit farther up stage, like closer to the lip of the stage. Actually, so downstage. He's like, when you start off, he's like, let them know that you're the entertainer for the night. Don't let them think that you're intimidated by them or that you don't deserve to be up there. He's like, you just have to be confident. He's like, you're funny. He's like, just do that. And so that was a huge piece of advice right off the bat. The other piece of advice that I learned was from Jay Moore's book, Gasping for Airtime, which is a lot about his time on SNL. But he talks about doing stand-up that when you start off, you hear like 100 things on stage that are going on that aren't just the audience. You hear the mic cut out. You hear the waitress. You hear people talking by the bathrooms. You hear like more than 100 things, but he says 100 things. He says the more times you do stand-up and you're thrown off by them. So like you're hearing things the audience doesn't hear. So like how many times do comics hear the mic pop or something and they call it out and the audience is like, what? Like you just killed your flow by pointing out something we didn't really notice.
Right.
No, I understand the duality of that, of like, if something major happens, if someone falls down in front of the stage with a tray of drinks, that would be weird not to make some sort of comment. Everyone saw it. Everyone heard it. But he said, you hear 100 things that no one else hears. As you keep doing stand-up and you're on stage more, that number will lessen. It'll become 50. It'll be 25. It'll be 20. It'll be 5. It will never get down to 0. So don't ever let those 5 things throw you off your game or dictate what you're there to do. You're there to make the audience laugh. Put those 5 things in the back of your mind. Those things could be things that you're bringing up with you on stage that the audience has no idea about, of like conversation you had with your girlfriend before you got on stage. You just checked your bank account and you only have $4. You know, there's things that you just have to let go because you're there to make the audience laugh.
Right. You just, what was that, popping the mic, or was that my bank account slamming shut because I'm not sure I'm not sure what's going on up here, people. Please.
Because I got one drink that isn't comped on the show tonight, and now I'm in the red.
Yeah, well. So when you look back over the years, both of them, no. When you look back and you're able to see, okay, these pieces of advice I think were really good for me. What's one of your favorite worst pieces of advice that somebody gave to you?
Worst piece of advice. Worst piece of advice. I was told by a club that I thought I wanted to get into, that I would do sets and I would do well. And I would ask, okay, so how do I get weekends? I've done sets, I've done well. And they said, don't ask us, we'll ask you. And then when I kind of prodded, I was like, but why? Like, why? Like, what's going on? Like, what's the pecking order? And I was told that, I was like, I make the audience laugh. I think that's what the goal is here. And they said, yeah, but we don't care if the audience thinks you're funny. We have to think you're funny. And I was like, cool, okay, like, put on stage. Like, if you want to hang out with your friends and be sitting on the couch in the back and be the only people laughing at your friend up there, that's fine. You have a treehouse. You don't have a comedy club. You know,
right.
You have a community center. You don't have a business. So yeah, that was the idea that there aren't so many different permutations of stand-up, that you can have two examples. And even though he has changed in his style a little bit, he's writing more. Seinfeld just did Mark Maron's podcast, where they are oil and water. Like, they couldn't be too different the way they approach the craft.
Right.
And they both have their merits. Maron was more notably known for going up on stage and riffing, just talking, having a powwow. Seinfeld is a mathematician with the way that he writes jokes and the way he structures them, the way he writes them out, and the economy of words. Where I agree with this is, if you write something out, go through it and delete words that you can that still leave the sentences and the paragraph and the joke intact.
Right.
Does it still make sense if you can go through and take a red pen and take out some excess words? I think, for me, being a performer, I've already told you about my background and my influences, love. I like to be a little bit of a vaudevillian performer. I like to be a little bit of a song and dance man. I like to play an instrument on stage, which immediately can be an audience or other comedians look at it and be like, oh, this guy's got a guitar. This guy's got a ukulele. Like, oh, this is going to be the worst. Hey, and it might not be your cup of tea, but, you know, you're going to cultivate an audience that does like what you're doing. And that doesn't mean that it should be so niche that it takes forever to find that audience. But yeah, I don't think stand-up is one thing. So I think not necessarily advice, but wisdom that was imparted onto me of this idea that stand-up is in this very narrow box, when I don't think it is. You know, I don't jive with that. Like, my favorite comedians are comedians who probably are nothing like me. And that's okay.
Right.
Like, I like John Mulaney a lot, and he's a very wordy, cerebral kind of comedian. I don't love his delivery and sometimes the sound of his voice, but I really I really like hearing how he approaches things comedically. And that's okay. Yeah.
Well, and I think when you come across somebody like that club that was like, we'll call you, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And you kind of on this side of that, and you see the lessons you've learned in spite of that. Sometimes we look back at advice that we were given or comments that we were given, and we kind of think, well, that was horrible, but yet, did it help form you to become a better businessman and a better performer? Hopefully it did, and you're much farther along than you would have been if you would have actually listened to every word that they said and still been sitting around waiting for them to give you a call,
And that's, I mean, if I have any advice to any young comedian, is get out of your bubble of performing. People that are friends of mine who live locally in Northern Kentucky or Cincinnati, I do maybe 5 to 10 shows a year, headlining kind of within an hour radius, like kind of Columbus, Cincinnati, Kentucky, Lexington, Louisville. But I don't do that much because I like being on the road. Like I like going to places, that want the comedy and aren't necessarily just packed with a bunch of people I know. And that's my biggest piece of advice is get on the road. There are some young comics who, yes, they want to have a home. And yes, you should put in the work and the time at a club, especially if it's your home club. But there's a point where there's a reason why high school's only 4 years. There's a reason why college is 4 years for most. It was 5 for me. But I'm not judging, but there has to be a cutoff time, right? Either you drop out or you achieve what you want to achieve and you get that piece of paper. A club most of the time, especially if it has the same management or the same rule, the same kingmaker, a saying is a club will never see you beyond the first time that they saw you. So all the things that they saw that they didn't like when you first started off, it's going to be real hard to erase that in their minds. I'm not saying that's a definite, but
I agree. I agree. There are comics that I saw them before I got connected with Steve and we opened Gutties. I saw some of these comics performing, and I thought to myself, boy, they're so full of themselves and they aren't all that good. I hope that they can eventually live up to the level of greatness they think they are right now, and it would have been easy for me when we opened Gutties to say, well, I don't want to give them the time of day because now, luckily for me and for them, I saw past some of those things and said, okay, let me dig a little bit deeper and see what we've got there. And I've given some people an opportunity to have some stage time at Gutties that, I've been very pleasantly surprised with how well they are performing this many years later from the first time that I saw them. And so I try not to continue to hold those things against them, but I know that there are bookers and club managers that they look at somebody and they go, well, I saw them and they're never getting any better than that. Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly hope, and I can tell you that people saw me early on and they've had me back to their clubs or their corporate events because they knew that I had gotten better. So they were willing to throw the dice for me again, let me have another chance. But yeah, it's one of those things you got to.
And you should get better with the more stage time you get and the more you put yourself out there. And again, that's why it goes hand in hand, I think, with the advice of get out of your bubble. Because, if you're just performing in front of the same 5, open mics are hard. I think you got to know, you have to have goals that are almost different than your goal. Like, yes, you want to make the audience laugh and be entertained. So I think you want to be as polished as you can with the new material you're trying or whatever you're doing. But you also can't beat yourself up if all it is like 5 comics, and 2 people who aren't paying attention. Know then that the open mic is a dress rehearsal and you're running it for time. And you want to see, okay, does this 10 minutes really equal 10 minutes or is it 3 minutes?
Yeah. Well, Ricky, I want to thank you for taking some time to hang out with us here at the Pops and the Rican show. And it's been good catching up with you and definitely wanted to make sure people knew about your album so that they can get that now, and they can be ready to bring it to the club and get a second autograph and all that good stuff when you roll through. But want to thank you for taking your time to hang out with us today, and we look forward to having you come through the club. Wanted you there in March, and COVID had other ideas, but yeah, we're looking forward to having you come roll through the club. And I'll let you know, I know I'm probably going to be heading down to the Cincinnati area in a couple of weeks, I think it is. And while I'm down there, I'll let you buy me a steak or a cup of coffee or something, just because I'm
chili cheese. Tony's.
I'm a giver like that. I'll let you buy for me because I'm a giver like that. But
I'm a giver too. I will give you chili cheese conies and give you indigestion later that night.
Well, hey, you can't go wrong. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So, yeah. Anyway, I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you again soon. So. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Pops and the Rican Show.
Thanks.
All right. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Pops and the Rican Show, and hope that you enjoyed our visit with Ricky. And by all means, get out there, get his album. If you haven't watched his Drybar special, you can, if you get the Drybar app, you can watch that. If you want to go online, you can watch it. But it's well worth your time to watch that and watch it several times and share it with your friends and family and complete strangers and have a good time with it. But then just know that he is coming to Gutty's, and we'll probably have him back on the show before that time, just so we can talk a little bit about the preparation for that show. And let's see. Oh, the other thing I wanted to make sure and mention to you is if you haven't already downloaded the Gutty's app, you should go on. You can get it on iTunes or Google Play. Yeah, and download it. You'll find out all the information about upcoming shows. You can get your tickets from there. You can find out all about we've got Gutty's Tubies. So if you're like, hey, I want to go out in public, but I got to wear a mask, you could go in style wearing a Gutty's Tubie. And we've got those. You can order now. We also have merchandise you can get. So just get the app and download it and join us in having some fun with all of the craziness that we have going on. So I think that pretty much wraps up this episode of the Pops and the Rican Show. And as we always end it, I usually say, I'm Pops, and then Steve says, and I'm the Rican. I don't do a good impersonation of Steve. And I'm the Rican, and this has been the Pops and the Rican Show. Deuces. I think that's how we do it. I don't remember.
Pops and the Rican.
Pops and the Rican.
Look at this. Pops and the Rican. The Pops and the Rican. What's the Pops and the Rican? Look at the top of his head. Pops and the Rican.
Pops and